Great. Well, thanks, Anna. My name is Andrea Sykes, and I'm going to walk us through the remaining portion of the webinar, talking about creating an evaluation plan. This webinar was based on my years of experience working with various grant-funded programs and developing evaluation plans with them. So, when we finish this webinar, you should have a better understanding of the importance of evaluation and what AccessLex expects to see in your evaluation plan. You're also going to learn how to develop a plan that aligns with your program's goals and objectives. You'll also have some ideas given on how to identify and allocate resources needed to complete your evaluation. Ultimately, you'll be able to write an evaluation plan for your grant application that effectively communicates how you will assess whether your program's goals have been met. And this evaluation webinar has been written with the understanding that everybody's coming to the table with different experiences as it relates to evaluation. So for some, it may cover topics you already know, and for others, it may be completely brand new. And as they mentioned earlier, if you have questions that come up along the way, please note them and try to keep them as general as possible. As Anna mentioned, there will be time for me to work one-on-one with every applicant and can get into the more specifics of your program. With that, let's move on to the webinar. So just generally, what is program evaluation? Very broadly, it's a systemic analysis of information and data to measure how well a program is working. It's also used to answer the question, why does your program matter? An effective evaluation can prove the value of a program to your external funders or be able to share best practices with colleagues. It's also a way that managers can target resources to the most effective strategies or for making program improvements. As you're developing your grant proposal, you should also be planning the evaluation. Early planning will ensure that your evaluation is purposeful, aligned to your program's goals, and will assess its effectiveness. So this is sort of a road to the evaluation plan, kind of a general step-by-step guide on how you can get to that plan written with your grant proposal. The first is deciding who will write your evaluation plan. The second step would be involving your key stakeholders. The third step is establishing a budget. The fourth step would be identifying measurable outcomes. The fifth step would be writing your evaluation questions. And the sixth and final step is selecting your data collection methods. After this webinar, you'll be able to follow these steps and write a plan that would clearly communicate to AccessLex your program's evaluation plan. So the first step is fairly straightforward, but is critical. It's deciding who's going to be responsible for writing the evaluation plan. It could be the grant writer or someone else on your team. It might also be a committee of multiple staff members if more than one department or organization operates the program. If the plan is going to be written by a committee, be clear about each person's responsibilities and make sure that there is one person designated as the lead for writing the evaluation plan. Another option would be to hire someone externally, but you're going to have to consider their compensation for the work when you factor into your program's budget. If you are going to use someone other than your grant writer to write the plan, they should be working collaboratively and not in isolation. The grant writer should give clear timeframes on when the evaluation plan needs to be completed and allow time for review of the plan to ensure that it aligns with the overall grant proposal. The most important thing is to not wait until the last minute to think about evaluation, but to integrate it into the entire grant proposal writing process. Once you've picked someone to write your plan, then you'll need to reach out to your key stakeholders. This could include the staff who are running it onto a day-to-day basis or faculty that might be teaching classes within the program. It's important to involve these stakeholders because it will give meaning to your evaluation. Their participation in the planning process, you're going to let them know that evaluation is important to the program and that you are not just checking off a box or doing it because it's required by the grant. Engaging your key stakeholders during the planning process is crucial to the overall evaluation success. Evaluation can be viewed sometimes as a punitive activity because of the questioning and assessments that are made by an evaluator. If your stakeholders have input in identifying the outcomes, when you ask them to collect data that's needed to measure progress, they'll understand why you need that data. You're building support for the evaluation while you're planning for it. And stakeholders will then think less of it as a punitive activity and more as a purposeful and intentional way of improving the program and reaching important goals. The third step would be establishing a budget for your evaluation. I know that it's hard to think about using limited program funds for evaluation, but you have to allocate money in your grant proposal for the work. The results from a well thought out and executed evaluation plan will pay dividends for your program, allowing you to highlight the successes and demonstrate your commitment to making program improvements as needed. A rough estimate for what your evaluation may cost could be about 5 to 10% of your total grant budget. Your evaluation approach and data collection methods that are chosen will impact the actual cost of the evaluation. For example, if you're using data that your program's already collected versus creating an entirely new data set, that could make your evaluation less costly. You'll want to check with the evaluator to see if they can complete the work within this budget. Having an evaluator identified during the grant proposal process is not required. It's a good thing to have done. You may be able to reach out to departments on campus or within your organization for an evaluator. If you don't have access to an evaluator, there is an organization called the American Evaluation Association. They have a tool on their website that allows you to find an evaluator, perhaps locally to you. I've listed that link here for your reference and resource later. The fourth step in the evaluation plan process is to be clear about your program's measurable outcomes, as these are the backbone of your evaluation. Generally, outcomes are what the program is achieving or accomplishing and should be tied directly to your program goals and objectives. The outcomes are important because it shows how you're planning to assess the growth and progress of your students. It's very common to have more than one outcome, goal, or objective for a program. So don't feel like you should have just one. You can have multiple in this process as well. When you're writing your program's outcomes, they should be student-specific and measurable, and including a specific target that you're trying to reach and when you expect that outcome to occur. Again, student-specific and measurable is very important when you're identifying these outcomes. An example that might be relevant is maybe you want to improve students' LSAT scores. Then your outcome would be increasing students' LSAT scores by 3 points by the end of the program session. It sets your target and it shows when you expect that outcome to be achieved. Outcomes could be changes in a couple of different areas. They could be a change in student learning or knowledge. For example, if your program is offering classes focused on student writing, then an outcome might be improving the quality of students' written personal statements. An outcome could also be a change in students' skills, attitudes, motivation, or awareness. Your program could offer a number of activities that are teaching students about the law school admission requirements. An outcome related to that might be measuring their increase in understanding of the law school requirements. Finally, an outcome could also be a change in student actions or behavior. A common outcome for diversity pipeline programs is to increase the number of students who enroll or graduate from law school. If this was an outcome for your program, then you'd want to be specific about how many students you would expect to enroll or how many you're expecting to graduate. The most important thing as you're writing your outcomes, as I mentioned earlier, is to be specific and set those targets. The outcomes are important because these will lead directly to your evaluation questions, and this is the fifth step in the process. Those questions should be directly tied and written in a way that when the question is answered, you'll be able to say whether or not that outcome has been met. You may have some evaluation questions that'll give you answers that describe your program operations, and these can be important because they will give you information in detail on why an outcome may or may not have been achieved. In this chart here, you can see I've listed some very hypothetical outcomes and related research questions. The first outcome is increasing the percentage of students who know the requirements for law school admission by 50%. An evaluation question would then be, how has students' knowledge of the law school application process changed since starting the program? The second outcome I've listed here is 75% of program participants will enroll in law school. The evaluation question that you might write would be, to what extent have students enrolled in law school after participating in the program? When writing your questions, you want to consider having about 3 to 5 evaluation questions. That's a good ballpark because it gives you a focus on your evaluation on the key components of your program. Having too many questions will make it difficult to keep that focus as you're continuing the work during the grant time period. Now that you have your questions written, you'll want to move to the sixth and final step in this process, and that's selecting your data sources and collection methods to answer each of your questions. The evaluation questions that you wrote are going to drive the types of data that you use, the time frame that you're going to be collecting that data, and eventually the methods for analysis. Some possible data sources for an evaluation of your grant within your grant proposal might include student level data, which would be test scores or diagnostics, program documents. These could be student applications to your program. You may also do surveys or interviews of students or staff in your program. And last, it could include some observations of program activities. The data you collect is either going to be quantitative or qualitative data. Quantitative data are numeric and can be counted or statistically analyzed. Qualitative data is non-numeric but provides meaning and understanding through an analysis of patterns and themes found in your textual information. For all your data, clearly identify who or what you are collecting the data on and when you're going to collect that data. Be sure to show that you have the capability to collect and analyze the data in a timely manner. For example, if you're going to measure a change or a potential increase in student learning, then you're going to want data from 2 points in time to show that change. That might include a pre-program test of their knowledge and a post-program test of their knowledge. If you're tracking student outcomes long after they've participated in your program, you're going to need to be able to describe your plan for tracking students after they finish and being able to measure how they achieve that outcome. And that often relates to eventual graduation from law school or enrollment from law school. Next, you're going to need to be clear about the methods for analyzing your data and what that's going to allow you to say about your program. Early thinking about the possible results of your evaluation can help you fine-tune your proposed methods. For example, if you're using quantitative data like a student test score to measure performance, will you be calculating the average test score or using statistical analysis that compares test scores of different student groups to determine whether there are any statistically significant differences? The analysis methods you choose will affect who you're collecting data on and the specific skills that will be needed for that analysis. As you think through the possible data sources and analysis methods, you're going to need to weigh the experience and the skills of your evaluator, your evaluation budget, and any other resources as you settle on your final methods. This slide here shows you a way to sort of organize your evaluation questions, your data collection methods, and then also think about your early thinking on what the information will allow you to say. For each of your questions, you would list those in the first column. The second column, you'll be listing your data sources, and that would include the sample you're collecting the data from and the time frame for that data collection. And then the final column, as it relates to that question, you would present possible findings or conclusions, and also include any limitations to your approach and what that might mean for your evaluation. During evaluation planning, it's really important to keep in mind the final product because it will ensure that your evaluation produces answers to questions that matter to the long-term viability and sustainability of your program. So now we've covered all the aspects of an evaluation plan, and then you'll need to put it all together for the AccessLex grant application. This is a general format to follow in your grant application of how your evaluation plan should be organized. The first section is just a summary of your program goals, objectives, and outcomes. This should be a very high-level summary of what you've already written out in your grant proposal in more detail. The second section is really the meat of your evaluation. This is going to be your questions, your data sources, and your analysis methods. The third section is going to list your key timeframes for your evaluation work and the deliverables that you plan on sending to AccessLex and any other key stakeholders. You should list out in here interim and final evaluation reports that are going to span the entire grant time period. The fourth section is where you describe the key staff conducting the evaluation and how the staff are going to be communicating with how the evaluation staff are going to be communicating with program staff while they're doing their work. This is really important because evaluation should be integrated into the overall program and not something conducted in isolation. And last, you need to include a section that summarizes the amount of money that you're planning to allocate for the evaluation work over the course of the grant period. This slide here just gives you some resources that you can follow up if you want some more information about evaluation in general. They're very user-friendly and should be helpful to you. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, and she can walk through some of the next steps. And as she mentioned earlier, one of those next steps will be working directly with me, and you'll be receiving an email from me within the next few days, sort of outlining how that process will work.
Andrea, before we hand it back over to Anna, we just did have a question that came in while you were talking.
Okay.
And it related to, I believe, step 5, writing the evaluation questions.
Okay.
And so the question was, do we do 3 to 5 questions per outcome or just 3 to 5 questions in total?
So the 3 to 5 questions is in total. Again, you want the evaluation questions should be written broadly, that they may cover multiple outcomes. Some of your outcomes could be related. So think of ways of how that evaluation question can encompass that outcome. And there could also, you can see here, I put some sub-questions. That's always a possibility too. But again, I think if you have an evaluation plan that lists, 11 to 12 evaluation questions, that's really going to be too much of a micro level. And my feedback I would give back to you would be to synthesize it up and write those questions a little bit more broadly. Does that help out a little bit more?
That's great. Thank you, Andrea. I am also going to, there's another question that came in too. How can, might be an obvious question, but how can an evaluation be tied to an expense? How
can it? I'm not sure I understand that question completely.
Okay, let's. So why does I think it meant why does the evaluation cost something?
Oh, well, I mean, someone has to spend time doing the data collection and analysis. So much of the evaluation work is going to be budgeting for the time for the person or the organization that will be doing that. There's a significant amount of time in doing those pieces in terms of data collection, data analysis, and then writing the report for you. So that's what you need to budget for in your grant application. I know in past years, I've done this technical assistance piece for grant programs in the past, and people often say, well, I'll do the evaluation in addition to my regular program responsibilities, and that's really not, and so just being encompassed within my general work, and it really isn't acknowledging that there is going to be a fair amount of time and effort that's going to need to be undertaken to really gather the data, analyze it, provide some meaning for it, and so that it can be a meaningful piece of your overall program operations. So it's good to think about that budget in the front end, and it may adjust over time as you adjust your evaluation plan from during the planning process to implementation, but at least you need to acknowledge that there will be an expense associated with the work.
Got it. Thank you, Andrea. And just for those of you on the line, the slide with the evaluation resources, I dropped the text on that slide into the chat panel, so you have the live links there for you as well. And I think those are the only questions that came in through the chat panel. So I think we can then turn it back over to Anna.
Hi, thank you, Andrea. That was very helpful. So while I'm talking, feel free to keep sending questions into the chat box. But like I mentioned earlier, I just want to remind you all that this webinar is recorded, so we will be able to make it available online to you shortly, and once that is done, we'll be able to send a link out to you to show you how you can access that. If you do send any questions into the chat box, I just want to give you all a heads up that we do want to be mindful of everyone's time. So if we happen to see a question that it might be a little, that might be pretty project specific to your work, we'd be happy to take that question offline so Andrea can work with you directly. Like I said, she will be available following this webinar to offer that support more directly to you and make sure it's tailored to your program. And in order to do that, what you can do is you can just shoot the grants inbox an email, and I'll get back to you. The email would be grants@accesslex.org. And once you send me your information, I can pass it along to Andrea to make sure that she has everything she needs, and she'll reach out to you when she can. But other than that, feel free to keep sending in some questions or comments, and then if it seems like we've addressed everyone's immediate thoughts or immediate concerns, then we might be able to wrap up early, but we'll give it a few minutes and see if there's anything else that comes through. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. So if anyone has any lingering questions, feel free to drop them in the chat panel. Just direct them to all panelists just so that everyone can see those. And I also did drop the email address for grants@accesslex.org. So if you have any questions come up after the session, feel free to direct them there. Andrea and Anna, we had a question come in. Are we required to include our specific questions for the evaluation in our plan that is due by June 30th?
I can take that question. Yes, that would be, we encourage that you include those questions as a part of the application that you submit. I think with those questions, it would give us a better idea of understanding the outcomes that are associated with it and making sure everything aligns and that it speaks to your specific project's scope and the objectives that you plan to achieve through your work. So if you're able to provide us with those specific questions, that would be very helpful.
I think we have another one. Should anyone that will be potentially partnering with a project such as mentors be compensated? That's
not a requirement that they're compensated, but it's something that you could consider within your program. If you want to, I would recommend that within our grant application policy, we have a list of indirect and direct expenses. And so you can, I would recommend that you look at that table to get an idea of what those expenses would be. And then if there are other expenses that you'd like to include in your project that are not included in our example table, then feel free to, again, email the grants inbox, and I'll be able to get back to you with more guidance on that.
Thanks, Anna. And I'm just looking back in the chat panel just to make sure that we've answered all the ones that have come in. And I believe we have. So if there are any last questions, feel free to put them there. Well, Anna and Andrea, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat panel, so I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Great.
And
thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
You do the
Thank
same.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.